Go ahead.
Senate Bill 310 by Senator Orr.
All right, this is a bill I filed. We're only going to have a public hearing today on it because I think it's important for you all to be educated on this concept. It's new, and this is something that our former LFO director, Mr. Norris Green, has kind of come up with and vetted with some of his colleagues and friends that are in this space and business. So they're going to come tell you all about the bill, how it should work, would work if it were to pass. And then I am going to call on the retirement system representative and local governments and to get their feedback as well on this and just educate you members. And I hope you won't be tempted to leave, but this is something as we deal with and then we'll certainly be gone well before the general fund convenes at 11 o'clock. So learn something and learn about this unique concept that Mr. Green, who has the credibility to bring such concept, has created. So this time I'll call on Mr. Green to come introduce the concept.
Thank you, Senator Orr. Before we start, just want to let you know, I am on the Retirement Systems Board of Control. I'm actually on the investment committee over there. I say that because I want you to know that I wouldn't bring anything over here that I thought detrimentally affected the RSA board. I'm also on Liane's executive committee over at the association. We all have the same interests, and that's doing the best we can for retirees and keeping the system as strong as we can. Quick background. Since 2006, there has not been a COLA granted to state employees or teachers. The reason for that is somewhere a little before that, the groups that set the standards for pension systems came in and said, if y'all are going to do ad hoc COLAs, and by the way, Alabama's COLAs are considered ad hoc because we don't have in our statutes any provision to give COLAs to state employees or teachers. 75% of the pension plans out there do. They pre-fund them, know when they're going to be. They may be tied to CPA. They may be tied to investment returns. They may be retired to something else, but Alabama chose not to do that. And so if there is an increase, it's done by the legislature. It's considered ad hoc. So there hasn't been one since 2006 because the Governmental Accounting Board, the standards they set said, listen, if you're going to give these COLAs, you got to look at the long-term liability associated with them. And so there were a bunch of them on the books. And so Alabama's unfunded liability in both of their systems shot up when this ruling took place. And Dr. Bronner and RSA and really the board, and I agree with it. I don't think you should keep giving COLAs that you didn't pay for and adding to the liability, which is why we came up with this system I'll get to in just a second. But the ones that are out there, they've been paid down some. 17 years have gone by, but the way they account for it, you can't really see it. It's in with everything else that goes on to make unfunded liabilities, so you don't really know. So that's another thing I'm going to address here. So what we did, we tried to come up with a plan to allow y'all to consider COLAs again, but not add to the unfunded liability of the retirement systems. Well, how do you do that? You're used to giving bonuses. The reason Liane and both groups went to bonuses because it was 1 year only, and it didn't go forward, and therefore no liability attached. So we came up with a process to do a similar thing with cost of living raise, and I'll just make this one up. But say you gave a 2% cost of living raise, you pay 100% of the cost for the first year. It has to be in the budget. The legislature controls it in the budget. You'll see it in the budget. You'll see the amount of money it costs. You'll see the retirement rate that generates that kind of money. You'll see that every year in the budget document. If you don't put it in the budget, there is no payment made for that year. So it has to be done that way. It's not a recurring liability. It's an annual legislative budget item. So it goes from a RSA liability to a legislative budget item, just like salaries, just like health insurance, just like everything else you do. You do it 1 year at a time, and if you run out of money and you don't do it, it doesn't happen. you have to set it up this way, I think, to keep from having recurring liability. So if this happened, and by the way, this bill is not a pay raise bill. This bill sets up the procedure for doing this. It says in the future, if y'all ever do a COLA, this is how it's paid for. You cannot throw liability on the retirement systems anymore. You have to do it this way. You have to do it in your budget. You have to provide 100% of that year's funding for it to be effective. If you think about it, salaries, when y'all give cost of living raises for salaries, that's a forever cost. It adds to whatever you added for the rest of the time. Those salaries are that much higher. With retiree COLAs, it's just the opposite. The first year is the highest year, and that's a concept that the cost goes down each year. As salaries go up, the cost goes down, the rate drops. But you watch it each year. Each year you'll see the rate and you'll see how much it costs. As time goes by, if it got cheap enough and the rate was small enough, you might want to look at doing a different one. But that's the way it would work. Each year the same way. It's got to be in the budget. If it's not in the budget, it doesn't get paid. Like I said, and it's considered not authorized, and so it's not even legal after September 30th of any year. So it'd be difficult for somebody to come in and say this is a recurring liability on the retirement systems. It's not a recurring liability on the legislature. You can do that anytime you want to. This pays the total cost. There's no borrowing associated here. There's no interest associated with this. Again, it's a declining expenditure. I've been around long enough to know when somebody comes asking for money, y'all like for them to ask for less than they got the year before. It'll always be lower. Unfortunately, the reason it's lower is not something you like to talk about, but there are fewer retirees each year as time ticks by, and you only pay till the last one receives the last check. And so that's the way it works. To me, that works for y'all.
Mr. Green, can you
Yes,
walk us
sir.
through an example, just a hypothetical? Do you have something in your back of your head? You can just kind of make up a hypothetical.
Let me make up one that we talked about. Let's just say for 2025, not even this budget you're dealing with, but the one after that, you wanted to give a 2% COLA to state employees. The actuary would say, okay, a 2% COLA will cost X percent, and in terms of what the total payroll of the employees' retirement system, the people that are in the employees' retirement system, you look at the total salary cost of them. What percent of that will pay for this cost to give a 2% COLA for state employees? So that I looked at the ERS. I looked at last year. I looked at how many people are alive today that got the pay raise in 2006. And there were only 9,000 state employees, and that was last year. It's probably less than that now. So most of those people have moved on. So you could do a class. I don't think you'd want to when you thought it through, but I think you could do it any way you wanted to. One thing I would say is, like I said, until their pension is eaten up by inflation, there's really no need to keep adding to it, especially the recent retirees. Y'all started giving cost of living raises again, and y'all have not prohibited merit raises again. And so their salaries have kept up. When they retire, their pension's okay. Back in the old days, merit raises were frozen and there were no COLAs. So a lot of people got out of government because they weren't getting any more money, and they weren't going anywhere, and so they retired. And so that's different things happened. But I would say these times, you wouldn't need to do one for a few years.
Okay. Let's, anybody got any questions for, Mr. Green will be available. He's not going anywhere, but we got to start moving. We got a few proponents and then some other folks I want to hear from. Anybody have a burning question for Mr. Green? All right. Thank you, Norris.
Sure.
Ms. Kelly, you wanted to comment from the local perspective, perhaps?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I want to thank you, Senator Orr, first of all, for bringing this bill forward and letting us have this discussion. It's something that's important. This legislation will affect all retired educators, retired state employees, and it also will be available to local government, city, counties, and public board retirees. Of course, they opt in by resolution like they do the bonus. We have worked on this. This isn't something new. We have been working on a proposal like this for several years, and just by virtue of people that retire from the state, I have 3 past presidents here. You just heard from Norris, who worked at LFO for 40 years, State Comptroller, former State Comptroller Bob Childree, former finance directors. They all have worked with this in the past. They understand what happened originally, why COLAs ceased to exist, the reason for that. They've served on RSA's board and in several capacities. So they certainly are experts in this area. But I just thank you all for listening and keeping an open mind moving forward with this.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Bob Childree, the former comptroller. You can just kind of keep it brief, Mr. Childree.
I will, because thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will keep it brief because my role here really is to represent issues that might be brought to our attention based on the idea of long-term liabilities and the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So I have a lot of experience with that. I was there when the Governmental Accounting Standards Board was created. I understand what their role is. I understand why they decided that long-term liabilities were important to put on the financial records, as we all would agree with. And I would also tell you that I have spent a considerable time discussing these issues in this bill with the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And I have, the ability to answer any questions that you might have regarding that. And I would be very much appreciative if you guys would consider this in a favorable way.
Thank you, Mr. Childree. Appreciate your being here. Next, we have what concerns or what thoughts come from down the street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we agree, and I think it's a great effort to try and do a retiree COLA that's not liability, unfortunately, we cannot get a sign off from our actuaries or auditors that it would not be liability. This is a completely new concept. They haven't seen it before. Actuaries and auditors are by their nature very risk averse. And so for them to come out and say it definitively wouldn't be liability, it's a difficult position for them to take. And part of the issue, it doesn't make sense on paper because like Mr. Green said, this would be a budgetary item. If you don't fund it, we don't pay it. So why would it be long-term liability? And unfortunately, with pensions, there's a lot of things that are counterintuitive. And one thing with liability is they do not consider funding when they're talking about the liabilities for a system. And so that's been the difficulty in getting GASB or the actuaries or auditors to definitively sign off on it. And it's something that, you wouldn't know right away if it was going to be liability. It probably wouldn't be for a few years. But we can't get anyone to say that it would not be in the future. So that's our concern. Hopefully we can continue to work on it, maybe get there.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Any questions? All right. Thank you, Ms. Scott, for kind of weighing in on the problem of getting GASB to give us some kind of definitive guidance on a vehicle like this. Lastly, we have just want to hear from the locals again. Lauren Hodge, are you here? There you are. Would you like to remark real quickly, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee members. I'm Lauren Hodge with the Association of County Commissions. A few things. One, this new concept was introduced last week, so unfortunately I'm not in a position to tell you counties have approved this method, so to speak. However, I can tell you that with past bonus opportunities for our county retirees, the overwhelming majority of counties, when it has been financially feasible, always choose to approve and fund those opportunities for our retirees. Second quick issue, we do have a few concerns with the language as it has been introduced. However, I'm very confident that with working through ARSEA and you, Mr. Chairman, as the sponsor, we can address our concerns. So we look forward to helping in this effort moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.